Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're originally scheduled today to talk about my support for law enforcement and actually a little bit about my background in law enforcement, because one of the things that I'm proud of in my career is that I've spent 8 years in law enforcement, first as an FBI agent and then as a county prosecutor, and I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. It's something I've tried to honor in my life and in my career. And I was very proud to receive officially earlier this week, and we were doing a tour about this, that we've received the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. I'm here with Jay McDonald, the president of the Ohio FOP. It is not a coincidence that Mr. Kasich and his team have chosen this moment where we are starting to coalesce support, particularly around my record on law enforcement and my support for law enforcement, both in my 8 years in law enforcement and also as a mayor and as a county executive, that they have chosen this moment in the campaign to try to inject a personal attack, which is as low as it gets. And I want to give the press some information about that whole situation. And if you'll bear with me, and then I'll take questions for as long as you have questions about it. And Jay is here also to make a few statements and also answer questions to the extent that he can. So when I first started looking at, I'll never forget, when I first started looking at running for governor, a friend of mine said, who happens to be a Republican and happens to live in the Columbus area, said, "Ed, you know, they are not going to let you go through this campaign with your reputation as you currently enjoy it. They are not going to let you present yourself to the public as a person that's been a father of 4, married for 23 years, and had a background in law enforcement, and as somebody that's cleaned up government. They're not going to let you do that, and they're going to go as low as they need to try to hang on to power." And I said that you know, maybe if I made a mistake, it was in kind of assuming that if I'd lived my life to a certain standard that I would be immune from that, but I don't think anyone is probably immune from that. And I said, well, I suppose that will happen, and if it happens, I'll deal with it. And I understand that's in the profession that I'm in. And that's what you're seeing the results of here today. And we have evidence that I'm going to talk to you about exactly how closely involved John Kasich's team was in this tactic that they used here today. So where does this go back to? Well, I'm going to start from the very beginning. So in a little bit less than 2 years ago, in the fall of 2012, there were a group of friends of mine and folks that I had worked on with some economic development issues from Ireland, who we had visited in Ireland on a trip that I took over there, whose families are from the same part of Ireland that my family is from, and who have become good friends of mine. And they were visiting the Cleveland area in October of 2012. We had a very late evening. There was a reception, an official reception, that dozens of people attended. A smaller group went out to dinner afterwards, and it went on late into the evening. At the end of the evening, we separated into 2 groups. They tried to get a taxi. They couldn't get a taxi at that late hour. We went into 2 groups. 2 of us that were native to Ohio were asked to be designated drivers, and I was one of them. And so the party, which was of 4 or 5 people at that point, split into 2 groups. As we were making our way to the western part of Cuyahoga County, we got separated. The 2 vehicles got separated. I ended up pulling over to a parking lot to try to get our bearings, to try to get a hold of the rest of the members of our party. And during that period of time, and check locations and directions on GPS, because there was a lot of confusion about that, and during that period of time, a police officer approached the vehicle, talked to myself, talked to the passenger, said everything was fine, and that was it. And that's it. And nothing else happened. It didn't even amount to a situation that resulted in a traffic ticket. Not even a minor traffic ticket. Because as the officer reported later, he got a call that it was late at night, that there was a suspicious, a call came in for a suspicious vehicle. He checked it out, was there almost immediately after the call was placed, and that there was nothing to be concerned about and there was nothing going on. Now, I don't consider that to be particularly newsworthy or salacious, but I'm sure there will be people that try to construe it that way. Let me tell you some other things that maybe you don't know. First of all, the members that were leading that delegation, which is a gentleman named Peter Hines and Joanne Grehan, one of whom was a passenger. Ms. Grehan was a passenger in the vehicle. I put out a statement that all of you, if you haven't received it now, will receive momentarily. And it basically says exactly what I said. This was a group of people. There was a whole assembly of people. We were together immediately before this incident. We were together immediately after this happened. They don't appreciate, quite frankly, that their names and reputation are being dragged into what is really, I think, a pretty unwarranted and cheap political attack by Governor Kasich's operation. They were, when I first contacted them about this, they were incredulous. They could not believe that something so innocent and so such a non-event could be construed in a way that would slander people's reputation and assassinate people's character. But that's the world we live in, and now they have to deal with it, unfortunately, just like I have to deal with it. Secondly, what you may not know is the way that the Republican Party has been intimately involved in trying to spread this kind of personal attack about me. I have heard that they were on some kind of expedition to get negative information about me for more than a year. And this is the best they came up with. This is what they've got. And this is what they're doing to try to avoid a discussion about the issues that really matter for working class families and for middle class people in Ohio. And unfortunately for them, they have left their fingerprints behind in the way that they tried to basically smear my reputation and spread this dirt. And I'll tell you how we know that. We learned that in May of this year, the Republican Governors Association was making public records requests in their own name to the City of Westlake and the City of Westlake Police Department. And so after learning this, we made our own public records request to the City of Westlake. And we got a series of, we not only got the information that they have put out, which basically states that a caller called in, a police officer responded and found that there was no cause for concern, no crime was being committed, and not even an offense that you could issue even a minor traffic citation for. But we also have a series of emails that go back between Republican Governors Association staffers and City of Westlake personnel. Now these emails start around May 20th, at least the ones we have received so far, and I'll get to that in a moment. But particularly noteworthy, these go back and forth towards the end of May, and then on June the 10th, there is an email that is going from a captain in the Westlake Police Department to the former chief of police of the City of Westlake. And in that email, what the former chief relates is that the mayor of Westlake, who is a very partisan Republican official, is specifically asking the police department and is, and I quote, looking for, quote, dirt that someone is looking for. Now, that period of time where the mayor of Westlake is revealed by these emails to be looking for dirt actually predates any of the official public records requests that have been filed in this case. Why is that important? Because you are not allowed in the state of Ohio to use city resources or any government resources for a personal or a political purpose. And the fact that there is significant evidence, as is contained in these emails, that the City of Westlake on city time and using city resources and talking to city personnel is looking for dirt about myself personally, about a traffic stop almost 2 years previous that didn't even result in a traffic citation, is pretty strong evidence that they were misusing city resources in their official position in order to gain some kind of political advantage for the Kasich administration. It's extremely serious. Now, after obtaining this information, we have consulted with attorneys. We do believe that this may be a violation of Ohio law, in particular the sections of Ohio law that prohibit what's called theft in office. That's any time you use public resources for private purposes, which this appears to be. Now, in order to get more information, it was over 2 weeks ago now that we filed additional public records requests with the city of Westlake, asking them for any other emails or telephone messages or text messages between Mayor Clough, other city of Westlake officials, Matt Borges, the chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, any other individuals from the Ohio Republican Party, any staffers from the Republican Governors Association, John Kasich, or any of his staff people. And we still have yet to receive any of that information. So we are going to compile that at some point when they eventually comply, and if we have to sue them in order to make sure that they comply with those public records requests, then we'll do that. And then after compiling that information, we'll ask for an opinion from the prosecutor's office about whether or not there's enough evidence to actually prosecute them for theft in office. Now, I don't know whether we'll get enough evidence, but what I do know as a certainty is that you had City of Westlake personnel looking for dirt on city time and bothering police officers about something that happened 2 years ago that didn't even rise to the level of a traffic ticket. And that is as sleazy as anything that I've seen in Ohio politics. Now, I wish I could tell you that they ended there, but they didn't. The Ohio Republican Party also hired a law firm to ask for police records for my personal residence in Lakewood, Ohio. And one of the things that they uncovered in that situation was a traffic ticket that my 17-year-old son had received because of a cracked windshield. So now they are collecting information about my minor children. And I will tell you that, and we put out a statement from my family, from my wife and I, that we understand that politics can be a dirty business, but we have a very strong family unit. We've been married for 23 years. We have 4 fantastic children. We're very solid as a family unit, and we will be no matter how this gets reported by the press, and we will be no matter what happens in this election. But the one time that my wife really got upset was when the Ohio Republican Party was literally getting police records about one of our minor children who hadn't really done anything wrong but was driving a car that had a cracked windshield. And she said, are there any lines that they will not cross? And if there's one thing that this whole thing proves, the answer to that is no. There are not any lines that they will not cross. If they can use this kind of situation or any other rumor or innuendo, they're going to do it. They really like being in power, and they plan on holding on to it. And they're not going to let standards or fairness stand in their way. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not going to just sit here and take it. John Kasich authorized this, in my opinion. And if he didn't authorize it, he needs to come out and say that he doesn't condone this kind of thing. If he thinks it's acceptable to get into the gutter like this, he needs to come out and say that. How do I know that the Ohio Republican Party, I mentioned the Republican Governors Association, how do I know that the Ohio Republican Party also condones this and participates in it? Well, first of all, as we all know, Mr. Borges, who runs that organization, was the hand-picked choice by Governor Kasich to run that operation. And just days after these emails go back and forth in the city of Westlake, Mr. Borges decides it's a good idea on social media to make a comment to me directly where he tells me, and I quote, that it's time for me to come clean with my family. Now, for these guys to talk about my family is, again, it's the cheapest shot that I have ever seen. We have never talked about Governor Kasich's family, and I don't condone that, or his personal life, and we're not going to. We're going to win this election based on the issues that people care about. But this garbage that these guys are trying to pull is going to backfire on them. And I'm going to predict to you right now that when the history of this campaign is written, people are going to say that their true character and who they really are and what they're willing to do to stay in power was revealed on this day, because their fingerprints are all over this stuff. I want to turn it over to Jay McDonald for a moment, and then I'll take any questions that you might have. Jay?
I'm sure all of you were coming here today anyway to talk about the FOP endorsement, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has about that. But I found out about this like some of you did this morning after we held a press event in Cincinnati to tout the FOP endorsement and what it means for our members and what it means for this campaign. And so when I heard this allegation, I did what any other law enforcement officer with 20 years of experience would do. I started to investigate, because I take the reputation of the FOP very seriously. Quite frankly, I take my own personal reputation very seriously. I have to deal with all of you on a regular basis, and I didn't want to go forward treating this allegation lightly. So I actually talked to the officer who came upon Executive FitzGerald, and I asked him very specific questions. Did you see any evidence of anything inappropriate? The answer was no. Did he treat you with respect? The answer was yes. Was there anything there that's newsworthy in your opinion? The answer is no. Hundreds of times, he said, in his career he's dealt with situations like this. And in my own career, I've dealt with situations like this. Quite frankly, you go, you make sure nothing's going on, you make sure everything's above board, and you move on. No crimes were committed. Nothing inappropriate was happening. That's what the officer told me, because I wouldn't be here today if I thought any of those things had taken place. If the officer was mistreated, I wouldn't be here sitting next to him today. Certainly, Mr. FitzGerald didn't call that officer an idiot for doing his job. So I don't think it's any coincidence that instead of talking about cuts in local government funds and how that's impacted Ohio's fight against the heroin epidemic, we're not talking about that. We're talking about 2 years ago, somebody was caught in a car with a friend. So instead of talking about how the state has gained 8,100 jobs and local governments lost 22,000 jobs, we're not talking about that. We're talking about 2 years ago, somebody was caught in a car with a friend. You know, let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about what's important to Ohio. And quite frankly, I don't believe this is it. So yeah, I'll answer any questions anybody has.
Take questions, sir. So, Ed, who was the woman in the car?
We have a statement that came out from both Peter Hines and Joanne Grehan, and they were leading a trade delegation. We had a trade delegation to their part of Ireland, which is the western part of Ireland, which is where my family is from. We have family members that we know in common, and in our interactions with them in terms of working on economic development issues, they've also become friends. They were at my house immediately before this incident happened. They were at my house to come over and stop by for breakfast the next morning. I mean, I don't know that the Republican Party knew that or knew that these were professional people that know my wife and children. I don't think they care, but they've released a statement saying, again, I was asked to give some folks a ride who are not in town, and it was late at night, and there was a couple of us actually that did, and so we did. And that's it. Myself and Joanne Grehan. It's spelled Grehan.
So Joanne was in the car with you?
Absolutely. There were other people in the car earlier in the night, but at that point there were 2 separate cars that were taking 4 or 5 people back, and another friend of mine had the other members of the party that we ended up getting separated from.
Where were you taking them? Where were you staying?
You know, it's been 2 years. It was one of the hotels on the west side. I don't recall which one they were staying at. And that was actually part of the confusion. They weren't familiar with the area, and the original directions that we had were incorrect.
But did they know what hotel they were staying at, the name of it?
It's been 2 years. I don't know if they did. I don't know if I got the right, because some of them were staying at different hotels. I'm not sure, Joe.
Was it always just you and Joanne in the car, or was there a group?
No, there had been a group earlier in the night. It was 10 or 12 people, and then it got down to 5 or 6. And by the time when the officer arrived, we had split into 2 groups, and at that point, there's just 2 people in the car.
And where were you coming from?
We were in downtown Cleveland. There had been a reception, and then a dinner, and then there was an after reception in downtown Cleveland.
Do you remember what city they were staying in?
I really don't. It might have been Avon Lake, or it might have been Westlake. I'm not sure.
Do you understand why the optics of it doesn't look good, great, or doesn't look good?
Sure, if you don't know anything else about it, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I guess in hindsight I was lucky about is that when the call comes in, the officer is there almost immediately. I mean, within seconds. And one of the things about the Westlake Police Department is they're very good, they're very competent, they have very quick response times. And they were there almost immediately. And these officers are experienced enough, and I believe this to be an experienced officer, that if they see something that's inappropriate, something results as a result of that. And I guess I was fortunate in a way in that there were 3 people that were really in a position to observe what was actually happening. One was the officer, one was myself, and one was the passenger, and all 3 say the exact same thing, that there was absolutely nothing inappropriate that was going on. Look, as Jay said, this is not a coincidence that instead of talking about the fact that I've received the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police, that I have 8 years of experience in law enforcement, that in 46 years of being on this planet, this is the most salacious thing that they can come up with, and that they want to distract attention from the fact that they have slashed local government fund, which has directly led to the layoff of police officers and firefighters and affected public safety. But instead of talking about that, which we did this morning in Cincinnati, now we're talking about a 2-year-old incident where a police officer knocked on my window and didn't give me a ticket.
Is this the most salacious thing that they could come up with? And you know the life history. Is there anything they could come up with?
As far as I know, I think I would know.
At the initial call that we heard, the caller said that they believe that the car had been there for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that incorrect?
I think it is, but you know, I don't think it would have been that long. I don't know. I wasn't timing it, so I don't know how many minutes it was. I know there was confusion because the passenger was trying to check GPS, was trying to get a hold of other members of her delegation, and I don't know exactly how much time passed. I don't know that the caller knows exactly how much time passed. That I can't say. That estimate sounds a little long to me, but look, there's nothing wrong with somebody calling something in. I mean, if somebody sees something and they think that they want to call it in, I have no problem with that, and I suppose that's what they should do if they have some concern about it. And that's why we rely on trained law enforcement officers to respond to these things and make a report. Look, I thought when I saw the fact that there's basically a 2-sentence report that, and it's pretty telling, by the way, that this could be summarized by the officer in literally 2 sentences. He got a call, he responded, and it was one person in a car talking to another person. Now, the fact that Jay even had to bother this officer by having them revisit it again, I think is unfortunate for the officer. But the officer is saying the same thing now that he said then. There's no indication of anything that was inappropriate going on, because there wasn't. There just wasn't. And the question is going to be whether or not the optics of it will trump reality, and whether or not the fact that the RGA and Governor Kasich's political operation have their fingerprints all over this, that we literally have an email that we will provide you that talks about that the mayor is looking for dirt. If that doesn't send up an enormous red flag about what's really going on here and why we're talking about it on this day of all days when we're trying to talk about law enforcement policy and the way the governor's dropped the ball on it. I didn't go to journalism school, but to me, that is much more newsworthy than the fact that 2 years ago, an officer knocked on my window and decided there was nothing going on and I didn't get a ticket.
I have a question. First up, could you release the emails to everybody?
We will.
Okay, and then secondly, why was it 4:30 in the morning? That's well past last call. It's well past usual restaurant hours. Why so late?
Well, I was with a group of people from Ireland, and there was a party that was at a friend of mine who also happens to be Irish, who has a place that he was actually closed to the public, and we were there very, very late. And all I can say is that I was out with a group of friends from Ireland, and we certainly were there very, very late. And if people want to base their vote on the fact that on a very rare occasion, I might stay out late with friends, that I certainly did do. I don't think that's particularly newsworthy again, but that I certainly did do.
And I understand. I really do. This is a tough day. It's a jarring thing to happen, and all the things you said about your family. I get it. But you can't remember what city you were taking them to, what hotel they were staying at, or how long you were in the parking lot.
Joe, what I'm saying is 2 years ago, I was asked to give somebody a ride home. It wasn't where I was staying, it's where they were staying. And I don't know the exact, look, there's hotels that are on 90 West as you head out west. I'm assuming it was Westlake, but I think that there's some hotels that are over the county line. They are all within 2 to 3 miles of each other. This was not a particularly meaningful incident for myself or the other people that were involved, Joe. And was I timing myself in terms of how long we were stopped while we were trying to get our bearings and get a hold of the rest of the party? No, I was not. So I don't want to say an exact time because I didn't consider it particularly relevant then, and I don't consider it particularly relevant now.
You have a question over there?
How many people were in the group you were out with that night in the two vehicles? Probably
originally 10 or 11, and by the end of the night, I believe 6, maybe about half a dozen.
Do you recall why it was just the two of you in one vehicle and the other people in the other vehicle?
My other friend that was with me that was a Cleveland native had an SUV, a large SUV that other folks fit into, and we just kind of divided up, and that's how it happened.
Two things. One is, when did you communicate this to your wife? At the time, or just more recently, and her reaction, and also how
Sure.
at 4:30, how did you get separated going out the freeway? Because at that time, there wasn't very much traffic.
The other folks actually got lost before they ever got on the freeway, so that's where we got separated from the other vehicle. But I will tell you that, look, this is not something where I had to go to my wife and say, look, we've got some big crisis here. The party of people that I'm talking about were at my house around breakfast time the next morning.
Just a few hours later.
Just a few hours later. These are family friends. She knows everybody involved with this whole matter, and we consider them friends. And everybody involved, Peter Hines and Joanne and the whole group, are great people. And they know they've met my children. I have gone to Ireland. I've met some of their family members, and we're close and we're good friends. And you know, my wife and I'm lucky. We have a strong marriage. We have a strong family unit. And to try to portray this like I'm sure Mr. Borges tried to when he tried to give me some advice that I needed to talk to my family, where does this guy get off talking like that to me? That he's going to give me advice that I need to talk to my family? You know, it's just the depths that these guys will go. And all I can say is that I hope that people here recognize that they have overplayed their hand very, very seriously. The fact that they feel comfortable, and apparently Governor Kasich feels comfortable with his political operatives making comments about my family and getting records about my 17-year-old son's traffic ticket. Maybe there'll be a press conference about that next week. But I just think, I think it says a lot about them. I think it says a lot about them.
So you said you thought Governor Kasich authorized this. What evidence do you have?
Let me put it this way: if my campaign engaged in something like this and I found out about it, I'd fire that person. I'm not interested in my campaign trying to dig up personal information about Governor Kasich and his family. I've never authorized that, and we haven't done it. And these people have, and they ought to be embarrassed about it. And if he didn't know about it, and I think he's enough of a hands-on manager that he knew about it, but if he didn't know about it, he knows about it now. And I want to know if he thinks it's appropriate for the chairman of the Republican Party to be making references about my family. I want to know that. I want him to answer that.
But your emails are all related to the RGA, right?
Well, we've asked. We haven't gotten the rest of the information, so we'll see what else, because we haven't gotten exactly speedy responses by from Mayor Clough's office. Let me put it that way. But look, everybody is ultimately responsible for the tone and the substance of their campaigns, and this is what they're focusing on. Make no mistake about it. Their fingerprints are all over it. These are the guys that went on an expedition to find dirt, as the email says directly. And Governor Kasich has to say whether he agrees that they're focusing on trying to find dirt or whether he doesn't. And if he doesn't agree with it, he doesn't condone it, then he needs to take some action with his own personnel.
Isn't this just standard opposition research, though? Look for whatever.
I'll tell you what isn't standard. There are two things that are not standard. Number one is, don't look for police reports that have to do with minor children. That's number one. Number two is, the emails certainly seem to indicate that Mayor Clough and his staff are doing basically opposition research on city time with city resources. And they are not a part of the Republican Governors Association. They are part of a public entity that is paid for by the public. And we do not elect our local elected officials to use part of their time, and city resources, and city personnel to look for dirt. And if you do that, and we'll see if we have enough evidence to turn over to the prosecutor on that, but I'm quite serious about that. Because there have been times when people have been prosecuted for using government resources for political purposes. And there is every indication that that appears to be exactly what happened, and that is way over the line.
Would you be willing to share your phone records from that morning from 4 to 4:30?
Sure.
That you were calling to get directions and to link back up with the other group?
I wasn't calling, but you'd have to ask the folks from Ireland. I didn't have contact directly with the folks from Ireland. There were people in the Irish delegation that were calling. Now I will say this, that I think that the entire matter is, I mean, I guess I expect, I chose to run for office, and I expect people to try to put me under a microscope. For this trade delegation that's from another country that's here to be dragged into this, and for comments to be made or innuendo to be kind of pointed at them, I think is pretty unfortunate. I mean, again, I have to reiterate, you're talking about something that was not even of a sufficient seriousness to even result in a traffic citation or warning. So I'm much more concerned about whether or not city resources were used in an improper and illegal way. Now that is illegal. Yes. Yeah.
How long did you know? How do you feel about the way the chief spoke of your friend from Ireland and emailing him or nothing?
I'm just going to let it speak for itself.
Mr. FitzGerald, in the new high-tech world we live in, our web team sent me a picture of the woman they believe was in the car with you. If Lauren shows that to you, can you?
I'm not going to do a photo lineup here, but we'll do it. We can do it off camera, but I don't think that's appropriate.
Ed, how long did you know Joanne before this night?
I think I met the entire delegation, not just one person. Probably going back to 2011, sometime in 2011, I think. Maybe 2010, but I think 2011.
Okay, and secondly, During the vetting process for you as governor, did you tell party officials about this, or when did they find out about this incident at all?
Well, again, it's hard to know the way that an incident is going to be used. If somebody, if a police officer speaks to you and says there's nothing that he's concerned about, that's not exactly something that would be something to be vetted. I mean, I've never seen something so minor that some people are going to try to spin as something scandalous. If people want to try to do it, they can't. I don't think it's going to work. I do not believe it's going to work. I think it's going to backfire. I think people are more disgusted by gutter tactics. I think they're more disgusted by the fact that city resources may have been used to try to dredge something up 2 years ago. I think they're going to be more disgusted by the fact that they're trying to make comments about my family and get traffic records about my minor children. That's the reason people hate politics. Not, oh, I heard that one time a police officer talked to him and it was late at night and said nothing was going on. That doesn't pass the laugh test.
Looking back, do you think it was wise to be in a car with just another woman before your wife?
I mean, I think that, you know, I was with a whole group of people originally, and we divided up because people needed rides home, and I was a designated driver, and so I took somebody home, and it was late at night. And if somebody wants to say you shouldn't drive late at night, so be it.
Does that mean, designated driver, does that mean that you had not been drinking?
If not in probably 6 or 7 hours, I'd say, if at all. I don't, as some of you may know, I don't particularly drink. I may have, if I go out with friends, I might have 1 or 2 drinks at most. But the other thing that's ironic about this is, look, I have a record in terms of just kind of how I've lived my life and the standards that I've lived my life by. And anybody that knows me knows that the picture they're going to try to paint on this, it doesn't fit with that. And I've never had any kind of, incident related to anything that your question just referred to.
One of the things that your campaign has talked about quite a bit is the women's issues, how women are affected by policies of John Kasich. Do you think the optics of this situation will work against you when you're trying to talk to women who might be concerned? No,
and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that's happening in the way that the Republican Party is trying to use this is they're not just trying to trash my reputation. They're also trying to trash the reputation of the passenger in the car who didn't do anything wrong, who was here on an official visit, who's a person that's a person of accomplishment, and she doesn't deserve that kind of character assassination. And we're also a family unit. The FitzGerald family is also a family unit, made up of half women and half men, and we don't appreciate it. And I don't think